Hi, a very warm good afternoon to all our viewers on yet another edition of our Leadership Connect, which we call WiTalks. My name is Anirudh, and I'm the CBO for WiTace. Joining me on this Leadership Connect here today are two ladies and a gent. First of all, and I'm going to be introducing them one by one. But first and foremost, we are here today to talk about the future of work, agile learning strategies. So to begin with, I would like to introduce Nidhi Das. Nidhi is the director and the HR head of UiPath. So we just give, here is Nidhi. UiPath, of course, as an organization, needs very little introduction, being leaders in robotic process automation. Nidhi, of course, holds a master's degree in human resources. She has worked with a bunch of organizations, beginning with Reliance, then spent almost 5 years with Sasken Technologies, and then she's spent about 10 years with an organization called Autodesk, beginning in India, and then trotting off to San Francisco, then off to Singapore, and now back in Bangalore in India. Earlier this year, she took up responsibility as the director and the HR head for India and Southeast Asia, and South Asia for UiPath. And of course, anyone who is a director and an HR head would have had several, transformational experiences through their lives. So trust me, there is no facet of HR, whether it is talent acquisition, whether it's talent management. There's everything that Nidhi has gone through, and of course, learning and development. So Nidhi, a very, very warm welcome to the program here this afternoon.
Thanks, Anirudh. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Thanks, Nidhi. Next, joining me will be Rajiv Jayaraman. He is the CEO of Northscape. Okay, so Rajiv is a computer science graduate from BITS Pilani. Again, BITS Pilani needs no introductions whatsoever. Then he went and did his master's in computer science from University of Alabama, and then capped it off by doing his MBA from the Ivy League INSEAD. And I think it was at INSEAD that the first idea germinated in his mind of setting up this organization called Northscape. He is a renowned TEDx speaker. Set up this huge organization, more than 13 years old, that dabbles into virtual learning of every hue and every kind that one can think of. Among their specialities is he brings in simulations to the table. Today, we keep talking about the digital. Rajiv has gone beyond that. He's actually written a book called The Digital Blur, or sort of decoding the digital blur, as it were. And there is even a program that he actually, runs for several clients and organizations, most notably the leadership in any organization. So Rajiv, a very, very warm welcome to our program here today.
Thank you, Anirudh. Great to be here and looking forward to learning from all of you.
Okay, we'll see who learns from. We'll all hopefully learn from one another. At least there must be something that we can all do that. Okay, next is Shuchika Sahai, and I hope, she'll just come up in a minute. Here is Shuchika, smiling as usual. Wonderful to see that smile, Shuchika. Shuchika is the global HR head for First Source Solutions. So again, she's worked across several organizations in two leading organizations that dabbled in life insurance. Her longest stint was, of course, with Standard Chartered, where she actually played the role of people and cultural head. And now, of course, in First Source, with close to 2 decades of experience, more than 17 years of experience, Shuchika, if I remember right. And of course, like I said, for Nidhi, the same equally holds true of Shuchika, which is anyone who's worked for so long, there would be no facet of HR that Shuchika has not done. I think, for some of us who are from the HR background, we all feel at some stage, and let it be said, that when we reach the apex, many a times we feel that HR as a function is a bit limiting, and I'm sure each one of us in our own ways have found that out, and that is what, and that's when many HR professionals, especially HR heads, start challenging themselves. And I remember speaking with Shuchika not so long ago, where she started thinking about the digital space and what are the new skills that she needs to learn, and more important, HR needs to turn to if HR as a function has to survive, and if she has to actually lead people. I think we are in a good state as a function. If I think about HR or learning as a subset, we definitely today have a seat on the table. I think hopefully gone are the days when the business guys used to think, oh, what are these HR people doing here? I think we can talk business language today, and I think that's great for all of us. So Shuchika, once more, a very, very warm welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Okay, so let us begin. And the subject of discussion is the future of work. Okay, what's going to be the future of work, and how do agile learning strategies, given that we are definitely in a digital world and all that sort of happening with the pandemic being around. I would first go to each one of you, right, and try and sort of understand what each one of you are perhaps doing in your organizations as far as learning is concerned, because clearly learning, when I sort of speak to clients day in and day out, very clearly it has become virtual, right? And of course there is Rajiv, who of course runs an organization that has a bunch of programs. Vast majority of them are virtual, but at the same time virtual instructor led. So Shuchika, if I may sort of come to you first, right? Just your opening thoughts or comments, both about the future of work as well as how is agile learning fitting in this whole into the whole thing, and more so given the pandemic.
Thank you, Anirudh. And there are three questions packed in there. One, what is the future of work? Second is, how does agile learning strategy fit into that? And what are the learnings from the pandemic in the context of these two? Work is getting extremely digitized. Rajiv will talk more to that than I can. But, if you look at the productivity problem across industries, I think that problem can only be solved through technological breakthroughs. I want to make this come alive by a small example. I sit in a BPO organization that was traditionally a bum on seat business. I've joined 9 months back, and I thought I was joining a BPM organization with 30,000 people. And yes, there are 30,000 people, though I've not counted, but I believe the data that comes to my desk. But this organization is today pitching to clients transformation through digital, through process automation. So we're not actually selling your mess for less anymore. And that's a really good example of how the work itself is pivoting. The calls that come to the call centers today, wherever we have still call center operations, those are absolutely dealt in a digital way. There is analytics that supports it. There are a lot more agile ways of supporting the customer service person on that desk, in terms of the data about the client, in terms of the past references or the past requests the client has made to us. And all of this intelligence on the screen is possible because of technology in a very, very simple way. Amplify this. I mean, if you amplify or go to the back end of this, there is so much that you need to do technologically to make this happen, make this come alive. And there are people who are doing that day in and day out. So I think just the composition of work is changing. Uh, Linked to that is the future of worker and the future of workspace and the workplace, right? So workplace, workspace, worker. These are interlinked. The worker today has to be more digitally oriented to be able to make sense of this complexity. Uh, I'll give you two examples of where learning agility fits into this. Two very, very lateral example. One, I don't know if Nidhi knows, but we did a partnership with UiPath recently. And we ran a program within our organization called Digital Automation Program, where we sort of asked people, you know, uh, how do you sort of do this, right? Like, how do you digitize what you do? And we invited digital citizenship. People partnered with UiPath. We got some training. People got some real-time understanding of how should they digitize their work. And we had like 40 people digitizing their own processes. And that's what you want seen across the organization. Nidhi, I'm smiling because I know you're smiling because, this is great brand ambassadorship for both UiPath and First Source, but it was an excellent partnership to be part of. Like last week, we did something called a hackathon in the organization, and that was honestly my second or third experience of hackathon. And we really stressing on people management capability at this point of time at First Source, because uh, the great resignation has to be fought through empathy and fought through managerial capability. And that's what we want to package to our employees. Now, to do that, we sort of, as an HR department, I believe I'm an ivory tower. I genuinely believe that sometimes we can be ivory towers. And the challenge is to constantly fight that. And the way to do that is to amplify listening across the organization and to create solutions with employees. So we got our 1,300, 1,400 first line managers, engaged them through a hackathon, a competition. And we partnered with Amazon. Amazon gave them training. We said, okay, solve the problem of associate engagement, right? How do we engage with our associates better? How do we use technology to engage with our associates better? Because you don't have the luxury of just having backslapping relationships with everyone across the organization with the pandemic. And Anirudh, just some of the ideas that came to the table, I swear with my 20-year HR career, I couldn't have thought of them. They were fresh, they were new, and they were more relevant. And to me, that created a lot of learning for the team. Just the format was very agile and novel. It was not like people sitting in a meeting making boring decks. It was about competing with each other, which is the oldest human emotion to leverage in all of these, right? So that's how I think we are making learning come alive in an agile, novel way. The third question is, how does this become more relevant after pandemic? I mean, the whole shift after pandemic is like done to death, right? People are questioning their own attitude towards work, especially in the Western markets. There is just this whole uh, Professor Kolbe's thing on Professor Cald's thing on the Great Resignation. So how do you keep the engagement and water cooler moment alive in that environment? How do you sort of make sure learning happens in that environment? So you have to do more new and interesting things. You have to think harder, smarter, more creative, more innovative to reach out to people and engage them. It's become harder, but it's just amazing to sort of challenge yourself with that. I'm going to give one last example, and then I'm going to hand it over back to you. Recently, we won a deal in the organization that sort of, we were fighting with the big leagues. It was like a David and Goliath kind of a situation, and we won it. The technology was not ours. We partnered with someone, and sort of that partnership has created a big news in the market space. After the deal was won, the business head who had sort of anchored that deal called all the deal members and all the people into one sort of big wide call. And the learning that came from that, on what we did well, what we didn't do well, uh, you know what made this deal happen, what could have stopped it from happening, for me, that shared reflection and understanding was like an aha moment. And I don't think I've learned more on any other occasion in this organization in the last month as much as I have that, apart from that whole uh, human celebration and empathy flowing. I think that kind of thing needs to happen after failure as well. So if we hadn't won the deal, would we all have gotten together and done that sort of free flowing review? Is something that I want to make more alive in my organization. I'm going to hand it back to you, Anirudh, if that made sense at all.
Yeah, it did. I was as a sort of listening to you, and trying to absorb various things that you spoke about right in the beginning, and of course, I'm sure that's something that will stay with all of us. Very clearly, technology is here to stay. It is probably now the common denominator across everything, right? Without technology, there is just no going anywhere. And I think to the extent technology will influence everything that we do in our organizations, learning, of course, included, will probably determine, where the future of work actually ends up. So thank you, Shuchika, for that. Rajiv, I'm now going to come to you. Just yesterday, I happened to be in a conversation with the diversity, inclusion, and learning head of a very, very large and much respected IT major of the country. Obviously, the organization shall remain unnamed. And she was saying that what she's hearing from colleagues in her organization is that, give it to us at our beck and call, basically saying that everything should be online and available and self-paced and so on and so forth. But at the same time, and we discussed this, and this is the point that she made, I did not. She said, there is enough and more data and statistics that shows that actually a hybrid learning model, where you, of course, do have technology, but you also have instructor-led virtual training, that is often much preferred by certainly most organizations even today. And that's because if you really allow it to be completely, self-paced, then many a times from an organizational and maybe slightly selfish organizational point of view, the ROI is poor because a lot of people don't end up completing their courses. So you make great plans and on which several things are built, but eventually it doesn't go anywhere, right? So, I wanted to not necessarily just have you answer or, give us your perspective on that. But, you set up this organization almost 13 years ago, right? So you were obviously far ahead of your times. I'm acutely aware that, again, having spoken with several clients, that simulations are, a very, very significant part of the learning that is sort of that your organization does and you do, and that again has significantly upped retention, their retention ability. So if you can tell us your perspective, how did you start? What were your thoughts then? What do you think you've achieved? And what have been the learnings along the way? And based on where you are, how do you see yourself, going forward, and how does that time with the future of work? I haven't even come to the other point around future of work, which is saying that, as is well known, there'll be several occupations that will die out, others will come in, and there will be need for continuous reskilling and retooling. But more of that later. Let me come to you, Rajiv.
Sure. Again, I've got 3 or 4 questions there to answer. Let me see if I can do justice to all of them in one shot. Starting with the genesis of Northscape. Why did I start the organization? There was a personal pain point that I had at INSEAD, a global top tier B school, where chalk and talk was still the predominant methodology, right? Sage on stage, chalk and talk. We know this drill. Right, but there was this one particular course where I was immersed in a software simulation, and I vividly recall that experience even today, 13 years later. What exactly happened then? Right, and as part of that, I had taken a few decisions. I had some work experience prior to my NCR MBA, and I knew the world. I knew how this all works. So why are you giving me this stuff? And I was, playing through the simulation, and I got negative points all across, and that intrigued me, right? What did I do wrong? I thought I was applying what I knew from the best organizations in the world. And I remember going back to the classroom, sitting in the front row, firing away questions at the professor. And I'm usually the person who is sitting in the back row, doodling away, thinking of an alternative universe. But here I was, sitting in the front row and completely engaged. And I caught myself thinking, hey, what was it about this methodology that brought out that active learner in me? Right? That not only engaged me, that educated me and enlightened me, and it brought me into the classroom again, and I was a learner. Right? That was the pivotal experience for me, and I started developing these immersive experiences. Firstly, for the academic environment. Today we work with many global organizations across many countries today. uh, the insight is this: we speak so much about learning and the learning systems, focus very little on the learner. I would say let's start with the learners, right? This is design thinking at its best, right? So today the problem, and going back to the conversation you were talking about with the senior leader, is information is everywhere, right? That is not a differentiator, right? So we don't need learning professionals to give you a YouTube video or a TEDx talk for you to go and watch. You can do that yourself. But really, to what I think Einstein said many years ago, experience is learning, everything else is just information. So today it's boiling down to what kind of an experience are we creating for our learners, right? Which is durable, it sits in your head, it becomes muscle memory when you face the situation in the real world. Sort of like what pilots go through, surgeons go through, because these are high stakes professions. They are put through a simulated environment, a safe environment where you're allowed to unlearn and relearn. Whereas most of us think about how did we land up in our seats through trial and error, right? Sometimes unnoticed, we got away with it. Other times it's a disaster where we get called out. So I think that is the key insight around which the entire organization is built. How do we create a safe environment for the learner to not only learn but also unlearn? Now, attached to this, the whole idea of future of work and agile learning. So today, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of videos that we can watch and fool ourselves into thinking that I know that stuff. We are all today students of WhatsApp University, right? In the morning we open, we become students of this university, and we get bombarded by with a lot of news items and other things, and we fool ourselves into thinking that we know stuff, right? But it is not deep enough where we are forced to unlearn and relearn. That's essentially the need of the hour today, not just more information. I don't think learners need more content. More information is not needed. We need deeper experiences. So that's essentially what we do as an organization to help other organizations unlearn and relearn at the speed of digital.
It's very interesting because the first person who I had heard use this term about, unlearning and relearning, and again, because of the generation that I come from, hopefully you would have all heard about this gentleman. This gentleman, for long, was the managing director of Tata Steel, Mr. Rusi Modi. So I remember, being in front of him once. One of the things that he mentioned was that we hired some of the best grads and post grads from several universities in India and abroad, and what we do in the first 3 to 4 months is we help them unlearn a lot of what they've actually learned, and we instill in them certain core values, and then of course we start immersing them with experiences, and through that comes learning. So it's so very interesting that this is something that he must have said a good 25-30 years ago, clearly a little ahead of his time, if I may say so, because in those days there was no digital, right?
Yeah.
There was no looming threat, right? But he spoke about unlearning, he spoke about the importance of values, and he spoke about immersive learning. So
Yeah.
it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, if I may add, the original quote comes from Alvin Toffler,
Yeah.
right, from Future Shock. who
Yes.
speaks about illiterates of the 21st century are not the people who cannot read. These are the people who cannot unlearn.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, so Nidhi, I guess I now come to you. And, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's happening in your organization, right? How do you see the future? Anyways, you work in an organization which is completely at the cutting edge of technology. So given that, what are your thoughts on, the future of learning? What kind of strategies? Why is it so important to be agile? Yeah, just your thoughts around that.
Sure. Um, Hi everyone. So from my perspective, I think we are literally sitting at the cutting edge of technology, like you said, Anirudh. We help people basically become more efficient. Businesses become more efficient by using RPA and our technology. And like you all were saying, that I completely agree that unlearning has been one of my biggest learnings having joined UiPath in the last 10 months. So, if you look at some of our tools and products that we have as an organization, for example, process mining, it literally helps you as a person look at what your workflows and processes are, and literally kind of helps you document a workflow and process. And perhaps that's what first source would have used, Chichika, in the exercise that you all did with the larger organization. And what it basically means is, as an organization, we truly believe in the culture of agile. I don't think we can even work without that perspective. We continuously learning from our customers. We are continuously helping them unravel their journeys around RPA and figuring out how they can become more efficient and how they can become much more responsive to their customers. And that can only happen if you are in the here and now and you're willing to listen to what is happening on the ground and continuously making the technology work for you and digitally changing things when where required. So I think from an organizational perspective, I think our our values really start to tell the story of where we are headed from our learning journeys perspective. We talk of being humble. We cannot be humble if we are not listening to what others are saying. We talk of being immersed as one of our values, which essentially is got to do with considering what the input is, reflecting on it, and also then imagining the new future for our customers, and also being bold. And one of the values around bold is really about experimentation, which is connected with the agile workforce, right? So if you are not challenging, not experimenting, not exploring, I don't think that as an organization you can really for work fast and in the mode in which we need to in the new digital age that we are talking of, and fast. So we are fine to fall and fail forward. We are absolutely fine as an organization to take action, preempt, and transform. And we are fine if we do a mistake and learn through that. So if you really look at what we are doing from a company perspective, all of our learning journeys are carved out, supporting different talent groups that we have, starting from our very young people, individual contributors who have or show the potential to grow in working through a program called Spark, where, like Shuchika was saying, it essentially goes to helping learners identify what their current needs are or desired outcomes they want to really delve into and look at from a improvement perspective. So this spark journey is really carved out from the point of what's my development journey that I'm looking at for myself, what the organization requires, how it can instill some of the VUCA values in me, how can it bring in the growth mindset, how can I actually immerse myself and live those journeys. It's not just going through an exercise and going through a training program, but how am I actually living them in the world, and having a mentor and a coach through helping me in this journey of my own. And then we, of course, have very specific programs for senior leaders, directors, or what we call metamorphosis, which is like a good 4 to 5 month journey that we have very focused around simulation role plays, Conferry 360-degree, which initially even starts them onto this journey to begin with, and then providing them with the coach and a mentor who would assist and help our team members really grow. And for some very senior leaders, we are um, helping them navigate through this through coaches from Better Up, who really are working through our leadership team and helping them go through this journey of transformation, not only as from a culture perspective, but the VUCA, the digital, the hybrid models that we are all talking of in the new post-pandemic world. And I think being in the space that we operate, we just have to be leading the way there, and that's what we are doing, and really excited about that at this point.
Wonderful, Nidhi. Thank you so much, because I think you took time to elaborate as to what has been your approach at different levels within the organization. And that's really very useful and good to know. Rajiv, I'm going to sort of come to you next. This is the age also of TikTok videos, right? Uh, and like I mentioned earlier, there has been some need expressed in several organizations by employees that not only should the learning be quick, but it should be self-paced. How does that sort of fit in with the need for immersive learning and for using simulations? Because, as you said, that then adds to muscle memory, which you can then very well sort of add back. And when rubber hits the road, that comes into play. And at the same time, there are these so-called TikTok videos that are going on. So, how does one marry the two? What would be your thoughts?
Right.
What
I
would
think
you
that's a
tell a client?
yeah, that's a fantastic question. At the core of it, there are a few principles that we need to keep in mind. One is there's something called the learning curve that we are all familiar with, right? It takes time for us to pick up any new skill that we are familiar with. There's also something called the forgetting curve. Conveniently, we've forgotten that part of the equation, right? And there is a research repeatedly over the years that shows how poor human memory is when we learn something new unless we repeat it, right? Unless we use it, we lose it, right? So that's essentially the science behind it. So micro learning, TikTok videos, all these are great for reinforcement of learning, but they cannot become learning by themselves, right? And that's the other misconception or a myth that exists out there, that send learners bunch of these videos and suddenly their skills will improve. Knowledge acquisition is not equal to skill building. These are two very different things. I can watch videos till cows go home, but I will not build a skill. I'll only have this illusion that I've understood it, right? And knowing is not doing. These are fundamental learning principles that we know over a period of time. So I think while these shorter format videos, content, what you're referring to as TikTok format, all that is great to, I think, generate awareness in a very short amount of time. Can you generate awareness? Can you get people hooked? Can you reinforce learning? It's great for that format, but that cannot be an end in itself, right? It cannot be the primary vehicle in itself. Something more immersive, something more holistic, because again, learning is different from development. Learning is, I could learn something by myself, but how do I put that into practice? That requires some level of development. And development means what? I am at point A, I need to go to point B. There's a science behind moving from point A to point B. So I may have to get assessed. I may need to get the right kind of cognitive inputs, behavioral inputs, action learning. All of these things have to be in place for before I can say, okay, now I've reached point B. All right. So I think, as I was alluding earlier, we live in the WhatsApp university generation. Add TikTok to it as well. We live in that generation. So it's very easy to think that this may be the end game for learning, but it is not. It has to be blended. And end of the day, something needs to happen in our neural wirings, right? That's when magic happens. You can bombard me with anything you want, but unless something changes in my mind, nothing changes. So we need to figure out what changes in my mind. That is more important. And I go back to what I said earlier. Yes, you can use TikTok style videos, you can use simulations, but focus on the learner. How is it that they're learning? I think that's essentially where we need to focus.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Shuchika, I'm going to come to you next. And this is around, so Rajiv makes a strong point. His core point is we have to focus on the learner, right? He said it the second time. I want your thoughts around that. But more importantly, we've also said earlier when I was saying that there is enough and more research which says that several jobs, several vocations are sort of going to go out of, they're just going to go out, right? And as HR heads, and you have 30,000 employees, right? Not one or two, right? Or not even a few hundreds or a few thousand. 30,000 is a large number. What are your thoughts around strategies for, maybe reskilling? Because at some stage that is going to come through. So, and obviously you can't take it all together. It'll have to be done over a period of time. So, your thoughts around what are those things that you see might actually be slowly, be phased out, and how will you? What kind of training and learning do you have in mind as far as retooling and reskilling is concerned? And adding that, how can you do that keeping the interest of the learner in mind? That's bringing in the angle that Rajiv spoke about.
Couple, and there are three questions again, Anirudh. I'm going to name you the master of three questions. So let me just take the first question head on, right? And it's more a question. I think it's a challenge to this generation of HR professionals, business leaders, and CEOs, right? And the question is that we've all built businesses which have relied heavily on people and people doing manual tasks, and those tasks are about to get automated. And if you speak to one of our co-HR professionals who do job evaluation, they will tell you score this to this, jobs are going out. I'm like, oh my God, that's half my workforce, right? And they make it sound so simple that any job that doesn't have complexity, decision making, are going out, and they are going out on growth. And however, the pace is very, very different, right? It's not that 30,000 people are going to be, will become. We will replace all of them with machines. That's not how it is, right? Envisaged. It's product by product, service by service, deal by deal, sector by sector, market by market. But that pivot is happening. It would probably reflect for us today in the percentage of digital business that we do and how that is growing. That would be a really good measure to see. There are obviously, over a period of time, the organization shape will change. This is an academic discussion. I can say that very easily here. That unleashes a set of things in the organization. And for me, learning and reskilling is a big part of that. So the work that we are doing with UiPath on how people automate their own processes, the work that's happening across the organization in building a digital mindset, and how that can become a revenue stream for you on your desk. If you are an ops delivery person, if you are a technical product person, so that's something that we will build. We are building. It's a journey. Are we there? Not yet. We are building. We will build, and that's the path for us to take forward. Digital first, digital now is part of our organizational strategy. So we focus on four things. We say growth, and how do you manage the risk of that growth? That goes with growth. Anybody who wants to grow will not want to grow in a way that doesn't make sense to them. The kind of growth that we are looking for cannot come through adding more people. It can only happen through transformational digital deals. Transformational digital deals are very sexy to when you talk about them. They are very hard because you're selling in an ecosystem where the customer himself is pivoting on this. I mean, let's go back to banking, Anirudh. I mean, you and I know what part of banking was digital and how hard it was to digitize banking, right? So if you're selling in a client ecosystem, so it's a journey for the client, it's a journey for your salesperson, it's a journey for your ops delivery person, and for everybody in the ecosystem. So that's my other bit, right? Like, how do you make this come alive? Now, on the back of, if you want your salespeople to sell digital, if you want your ops people to understand digital, you've got to take digital skilling in the organization very seriously. And maybe what I'm talking about is experiments at this stage. But my CEO has actually told his top leadership team that you've got to pick up one technology and you've got to become adept at it, which means going back to what Rajiv is saying, right? It's not good enough. Like, if I want to cook chicken chili in my home, it's good to sort of go to a TikTok video and copy it. But and it really comes back to, what do you want to learn, right? You want to learn making chicken chili, do a TikTok video. Format becomes important then. You want to sort of, I don't know who eats chicken chili these days, but yeah, if you want to really learn digital, you have to sort of apply it in your function. One of the other things that we are doing at First Source is we are saying that, you can't make digital first, digital now, a conviction, a mental muscle, unless you do it internally. So we had 20 systems across the organization in HR. We are actually migrating to one big HCM. And thanks to the API world, which I'm learning, I mean, there'll be a couple of other things that we will plug into that. And that's a journey the entire organization will go through. And that sort of helps employee imbibe what it is doing to me, so what it can do to my client. And it makes a great client story that you are internally managed on an digital sort of platform, and the existence is digital. The other thing that Rajiv talked about spoke to me very much, right? You need to apply. Like we always say, leadership is something which is very catalytic. Something happens to you, and then you change, and then you can't sort of be the person you were before, right? So it's just, how do you sort of bring that? I won't call it cataclysmic, but I will call it catalytic, right? How do you sort of make that experience come alive for everyone? I don't think, if I, as a HR leader, if I embed the HCM journey across the organization, I personally will be so changed by it that I don't think I will like to associate myself with manual processes after that. So I guess it's that kind of a environment that you need to bring across in the organization. I'm a practitioner, Anirudh. I will always talk from a practitioner point of view, although I've spent 3 years in learning as a learning professional, and I've seen a lot of learning people get seduced by their products, their simulation. But I guess the point that I want to make is the application part of it is really important. And the second part of it is that, and I don't know how to describe this, I think there's an institutional permission that organization create for their people, where when you try things, you experiment things, you're allowed to experiment, allowed to fail, allowed to learn from it. Now, at a metaphor level, you could create learning leaves, you could create these hackathons, or these time box moments for people to learn, that sort of create institutional permission. But I think, for me, the most important thing that has stood out is when I sit with my team and my stakeholders and reflect on an event. I think that, to me, is an institutional permission that needs to happen. I said this earlier, I'm going to say this again. That's my formula for making some of this happen. How do you sort of unleash that learning culture, like, in the organization? I'm going to pause. I'm seeing lots of nods. I'm sure people want to add to that.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely wonderful. I think you've said so much, and I'm sure all of us and our audience is sort of busy absorbing that. Nidhi, your thoughts on any one of those strands that Shuchika spoke about, and then I will move on to the next line of questioning, which will be around women, because WITACE, as is known to all of you, is a platform that stands for diversity and inclusion. So obviously we can't sort of end the show without addressing what different learning strategies, if any, women need to be exposed to. But before I come to that, anything that Shruchika said, does some of that resonate to you, with you? Do you believe in some of them? Is UiPath doing something similar? So, some thoughts to you before I move to the next strand of questions.
Sure. I think I completely connect to what Ruchika was mentioning, and I really love the idea that, Jera was talking about. There has to be the change, the neural change in your mind for anything to first stick, and then for you to actually make the change within you. And from our perspective within UiPath, we really going through that transformational journey. Even if you look at it from a very HR function standpoint, we're really looking at how can we apply some of the products that we create for our customers internally within our teams. And like Shuchika said, without doing that, without really living that, practicing it, without building that mindset of automation, if I can't have that come through, there's no way I can go and talk about it or apply that into my learning methodology or how my people will learn or apply that into my policies or programs that I create for people to really, come up with that permission, as Shruchika mentioned, right? Like giving that space for people to fail forward and learn through that. So as a practitioner and as an HR person here, I think it's absolutely imperative that we apply some of our products. We are doing that in our journey, really relooking at our workflows, looking at deploying things, and tools like what is happening in First Source. We are going through a whole deployment of a very, very focused HCM program internally within UiPath, connecting it with how can we make it more immersive when it comes to employee experiences around that, right? So can we apply a chat bot which really helps connect with the HR function and give a response to something real quick? Can I, instead of doing something manually, can my process mining or my bots that I have really even pick up things from a workflow or from a document and even update things when it comes to first day of joining of a new recruit who's coming on board? So we're really trying to use some of those test cases internally, and I think without practicing it's just not possible. Completely relate to that point that Shachika mentioned, and I think for me it's been just transformational journey myself. Like, you have to unlearn whatever you did in your previous organizations. It's not necessary that that exactly would work in the setup that you are, and it's absolutely important that you are coming with that mindset of the growth mindset, I would say, to apply newer things, learn from other people, experiment, and be willing to fail if that means newer learning for you. And I think that point that one of our speakers here mentioned about is, this was great deal, and we kind of literally dissected it to learn what happened, what did we do differently. I think we are trying to build that culture even within UiPath, because not just the goods but even things where we fail, if we don't dissect it, how does the learning then come for people? And I think also dissecting the good things, because it allows you to celebrate your success in a much more beautiful, positive way, and encourages people to again do the same thing and make it like a repetitive process of growth and transformation.
Thank you so much, Nidhi. I'm just conscious of the time. We had hardly about 10 odd minutes left. So I'm going to come to the last question. And I'm going to go to each one of you with the same question, or at least a similar question. And this, of course, relates to, how women learn, and what are some of the research telling us. So one very interesting thing, it's a research that our organization did, but interestingly enough, a huge technology major, and again, shall obviously remain unnamed, they have had a very, very interesting experience. But first, let me give you some snippet of the research that our organization did. And this is very interesting. Even in an organization where women and men are given free courses, okay, technically the course may not be free. If you're working in an organization, the organization sponsors it for you. Women are somehow somewhat shying away from doing the more complicated or the more tougher courses, right? So, I would be interested in sort of just getting your perspective. I'm sure there's nothing right or wrong about it, but have you come across? If so, why do you think this might be happening? Okay, so this is one. The other is even more interesting, and this is a real life stuff. So there is, let's say, the organization, and the organization, let's say, has very, very well-known technical courses that can lead to certifications. And they are at dirt cheap prices. And for women who come from, let's say, the more marginalized sections of the Indian society, this organization would probably give it for free. And they've been doing it, but the offtake is nowhere near, let's say, desirable levels. Our experiment has been that, and this is not a hypothesis, if the same, when it is punched together with, let's say, certain soft skill courses, could be around communication, could be around confidence, very basic stuff, right? Around presence, stuff like that, suddenly the spark goes up and the willingness to accept and take on is higher. Like I said, in no particular order, given that Shuchika has this wide smile, I'll go to her first. Nidhi smiling, so I'll come to you next, and then I'll conclude with Raji.
So look, Anirudh, I'm going to smile less on all these events and on HR circuits now, because I really don't know the answer. I can only hazard a guess. I think this should be taken to researchers.
Yeah, sure.
And I think we should really do some project around this. But it goes back to the fact that enrollment for science, female enrollment for science, female enrollment for IIT, and engineering courses are lesser than men. And if I had to call out a societal imbalance here, and I gave this example recently within the organization, caused a little bit of stir, right? Like in India, and I hope you're referring to data from India, because
yes. This is India, very much India.
In India, in North India, Hindi heartland, meat-eating families, the chicken leg is a delicacy. It is reserved for the male child, and that sort of creates a societal imbalance in and a unit level institutional imbalance in the mind of the woman, that maybe complexity is not for me, maybe delicacy is not for me, maybe a higher order, I'm just hazarding a guess here, right, like, is not for me. And maybe the answer to that is that institutionally we have to create systems, processes, organization where the chicken leg is distributed equally amongst men and women. And I know it will hit people at a very basic level, that this happens. And maybe there is something about avoiding complexity and avoiding and sticking to simplicity. Traditionally women have been told that they are good for certain types of roles. So when you bundle that with a soft skill, a communication skill, which maybe from a stereotype perspective, a lot of women think that this is for me. Maybe it's somewhere there. It doesn't have to be, really. I have to tell you this personal story. My mother is a maths teacher, and she kind of tried to get me interested in maths, and she kind of kept at it till +2. And I was there till +2, and I suddenly said, oh, I'm going to do better at liberal arts. And I left maths and I took liberal arts. There was no apparent reason. If you saw my marks with some of my counterparts who went to IIT or other engineering colleges, but it's sort of something I told myself that it was not for me. And I don't know if there is an answer there to some of the research that you found out. Nidhi, please help me.
At times it could be to do with personal choice.
Yes.
But I think
yes.
you like you said, the point that you raise, it raises a much more base issue, and it does hit you at the core. But given that we are conscious of the time, I think this is where I will pause. And I accept the fact that we don't know the complete answer. Certainly we don't. But maybe it's worth going into greater detail. Nidhi, over to you. Your thoughts on it, if any.
Sure. I would think that what I have observed is that women, if you are able to support them in their journeys. I think it's a lot to do with the belief system that kind of gets created, like Shachika said, very early at age, right? So when you are, your parents or your relatives and all of that. So I think it really begins from the kind of environment we are giving our girl children when they grow up. So one of the things I keep on telling my daughter, and I'll give you the example, when maths get tougher, we get tougher too. It just has to be. It's got nothing to do with whether you're a male child or a female child. It's just that you need to have the conviction, and I think as parents, it's our responsibility that we do not allow our fears start kind of guiding or misguiding them in a way,
Yes.
right? I wasn't ever a great math student, not because I wasn't good at maths, but because at times the teachers you get, how you provide the context, how they help you, that makes a huge difference in your journey. And I think that what you mentioned, Anirudh, to your research, it's just the question of cajoling, giving the confidence, allowing them to fail in the space of trust, and allowing women to grow by providing the insights and input. And to the point that uh, if organization like Northscape can actually provide those simulated environments where failing is fine, you just are figuring out another way of doing something, or approaching thing in a different way. I think we should actually allow a lot more women to go through those simulations very early in their careers. It's absolutely cool to ride a aircraft and see how that happens. They need to literally unravel it. And I always encourage my daughter, play computer games, I'm fine. Don't do YouTubing and listen to those stupid you know sometimes very funny things. But I really encourage my daughter to play games because it just brings in totally different perspective in their mind, and they are looking at strategy, they are thinking of different things, and in fact it excites me, and we're happy to play with her if she does that all the time.
What,
So I think it's a
what,
question of really providing that opportunity, and breaking the stereotype over and over again, and helping our kids grow in a very level-headed way, where you actually placing equity a very important place in whatever we do give our children. And belonging really starts with there, right? How do I include them in even making decisions that they are very, very basic decisions, but if I'm including her on a table conversation and asking her what is your point of view on this, and she has that point of view that she gives, and acknowledging it is absolutely great way to start with small children.
thank you, Nidhi. Rajiv, I'm conscious of the time. We are virtually into the last minute, but your concluding remarks, given that you actually run a learning company.
Yeah, I think beautifully summarized, Nidhi and Shuchika. I think the mindset, the social backdrop to this problem, that's pretty deep, right? One, there are stereotypes that are getting reinforced, and secondly, the problem gets complex when the content that is being presented is not well presented, right? So I'm reminded of this book, Invisible Women, where they talk about, they scan the JDs of various roles, right? It's all written as if it's meant for a male. So you read it and you think in your head, hey, probably this is not for me. So that presentation needs to be neutral, and it has to be accessible, right? And that's in a way what we do with our women leadership program as well. Provide a safe environment where people can try it for themselves. Don't listen to anyone else, listen to yourself, right? You go through this experience, see for yourself whether it's working or not, whether this excites you or not, and then decide what you want to do next, right? Because there are all these filters that we've built over a period of time. We need to cut through those filters.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rajiv. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Nidhi. Thank you very much, Shuchika. It's been another wonderful Leadership Connect, or WiTalks as we call it. Really, on behalf of WiTACE, I'd like to thank each of you for being here and having this wonderful discussion. Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Anirudh.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a
Bye.
lot. Bye now.